Happy Thursday morning, everyone. I want to discuss an issue regarding the IDF from October 7th and the investigations that have been released and continue to be released in the context of the vast failures from the Army. I think it's important to analyze how the IDF handles these situations and how they right this wrong about what happened on October 7th and before, leading up to it. And I think that there's a question about whether Colonel Haim Cohen uh, should be in jail. And that's something that I want to evaluate today based on this report from Jerusalem Post, based on the reporting from, or I should say, the article from the Jerusalem Post on what happened. So I will maximize this here as we see. Commander of IDF Southern Command's Northern Brigade, Colonel Haim Cohen, submitted his resignation letter from the to the IDF on Tuesday, Israeli media reported. The letter was addressed to the Southern Command Chief, Major General Yaron Finkelman, who had just resigned himself. On October 7th, the brigade under my command failed in its mission to protect the residents of the Gaza envelope during the surprise outbreak of war. By the outcome, I failed. Now, yes, of course, by the outcome, he failed, but there are bigger issues, as we'll discuss here. And it's always nice when my son chimes up here. Cohen, who has served as the commander for the Northern Brigade and was in charge of oversight of the Nova Music Festival in Kibbutz Be'eri and Nachal Oz, chose to manage the battles on October 7th from the Division Command Center instead of from within the battlefield. So, as we know, Asaf Hamami, Hashem Yikam Damo, fought valiantly from the front. He was the commander of the South of the Southern Division of the South Brigade of it, and he actually had his 5-year-old on base with him that weekend. He left his 5-year-old with one of his assistants and went and fought, ultimately lost his life. His body is still being held captive in Gaza, but he led from the front. In Israel, in the IDF, the mandate of Acharai, of having your soldiers follow you, is very important. And Haim Cohen should have taken a forward position, but he did not. Instead, he stayed behind. And of course, the Nova Music Festival, Be'eri, Nachal Oz, sites of extreme massacres, all occurred under his watch. The findings in the IDF investigation showed that Cohen was responsible for the poor operational management in the Nachal Oz base before the war, and was also responsible for other failures, such as not giving an accurate picture of the situation in Kibbutz Nachal Oz. Now, we know at Nachal Oz, there were so many issues. The fence wasn't even continuous. There were holes in the fence. Soldiers like Naor Saboni were actually sniped by Hamas terrorists that put their sniper weapons into holes in the fence and actually made it almost impenetrable so people couldn't go back and actually fire back and hit them. Extensive knowledge of the base. Hamas had extensive knowledge of the base. So many issues. This is under his command. A whiteboard that was found in Cohen's office showed marks of forces that were deployed to each kibbutz during the October 7th attacks. And he listed elite units like Seret Makal, Yamam, and Shosh as operating in Nachal Oz. Seret Makal was not there, and I don't believe these others were as well, at least not till way later. What did he write in his letter? In his resignation letter, Cohen wrote, quote, "I will never forget the killing fields of innocent civilians lying in their own blood, the inferno and heroism of the few forces under my command, standby squads and brave civilians, children of light against a barbaric terrorist enemy. I will never forget the deep sense of disappointment from the total surprise in the early hours in which we fought alone. The stench of death and the screams over the radio will never leave my memory. We recovered and regrouped despite unimaginable losses both in the rear and on the front. We didn't stop until we cleared the area of the last terrorists and launched a counterattack on front lines with a broken heart but steadfast and determined spirit." He talks about his commitment to his hostage families, But I'll say this, something that stands out here. And he goes, he'll finish off his letter by saying that he will now be focused on his own personal hearing and that of my family and switch focus to Chief of Staff, Ayal Zamir. Okay. Haim Cohen, you don't have the luxury of focusing on yourself. You don't have the luxury of focusing on your family. You failed the soldiers of the Southern Command, the civilians in the Gaza envelope, Israelis across the country. You failed. You have heroes like Rami Davidian and others who got in their personal vehicles and drove to save the day. You have reservists who showed up with handguns, if they even had handguns, doing everything they can to save as many people as possible. And you hid from behind. I believe there's grounds for a potential trial. I believe that there's a real argument that he should be in jail. I don't understand how, if the entire ethos of the IDF is leading from the front, a commander has the luxury of leading from behind and continuing on to receive a pension, get a job, and move on with life. I've heard of many stories of soldiers doing far less and receiving potential jail sentences, military prison punishments. If the rule of law and if responsibility is important, there has to be room for consideration for utter failure on the battlefield and endangering the lives of civilians and soldiers alike. The civilians and the young men and women who risked everything in the Southern Division deserved better. And there has to be a case for negligence in the case of Colonel Haim Cohen. And it's noticeable that my son is now crying in the background. They're children. These are people's children. And instead of following the plan that might have even been there, although there wasn't much of a war plan, but the response to terrorist infiltration and leading from the front, Colonel Haim Cohen did not do such a thing. I'm going to find this Times of Israel article, which also mentions something here, just in real time. The results show he failed. Yeah, so he remained in his war room at the Gaza Division base near Aim. His counterpart, Asaf Hamami, the commander of the Southern Brigade, was killed fighting terrorists and his body abducted to Gaza. So the question is, why did Hamami do what he did? And that's because he understood the ethos of the IDF. He understood what it meant to be a leader. He understood what it meant to be a commander. Haim Cohen evidently did not when push came to shove. And the results showed. So it's something that has to be entertained. And I think that it's worthy of serious consideration whether or not IDF Colonel Haim Cohen belongs in jail. I welcome your comments and feedback. And I think this is a discussion that we should have about a number of people, and I intend to have that for the next couple of weeks and months.